What's happening, everyone? Hey, this is another episode of the Adventure Box podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about history, all things history. So right now we're having two different classes at the same time. Mondays and Wednesdays, we have it on, let's see, I think this month it's colonial life, while on Tuesdays and Thursdays, right now we have it on Egypt. And I'm super excited about Egypt just because it's so mysterious in all of its ways. And like we went over it yesterday or last week, the mysteriousness of Egypt can go back to such as its religion. The religion is not set free and clear. Polytheism against monotheism. There was actually a lot of change in this, and we're actually going to go over one of those changes where it went from polytheism into a complete monotheistic. But the possibility also is the fact that all those gods that they had were all different characteristics of a single supreme being, a one singular god. And that's even during the time of the supposed polytheism. But they say polytheism because they see all these different gods in all these different ways. And like now they talk about polytheism, but back then we don't know exactly if it was completely polytheistic, if there was monotheistic in there, if there was a it's a melding of both sides. It's really interesting. So this week we're going to be talking about something that is also very interesting. We're not going to get to it yet. We're going to talk about the Middle Kingdom. So the Middle Kingdom is, we had the New Kingdom, which was when the unified Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt. They merged them together and unified them into one. And this was by King Narmer. Now, over generations, there were actually I think about 10 or 11 different dynasties, different families that ruled Egypt throughout the New Kingdom. Now, come into the Middle Kingdom, and you have the 11th dynasty, the 12th dynasty, the 13th dynasty, and now the 14th dynasty. And this spans from 2055 BC until about 16 BC. And this is all the Middle Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom is not talking about that actual location, but the time period. New Kingdom, Middle Kingdom. Sorry, no. Yeah, not New Kingdom. What was the one before? Okay, there was the Early Kingdom. Sorry, Early Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom. And between most of these, there's what we call the intermediate periods. The first intermediate, the second intermediate, the third intermediate. So today we're going to be talking about the Middle Kingdom and the intermediate. And we'll probably span that over this podcast and Thursday's podcast as well. So let's go over a little bit of the Middle Kingdom. So in the 11th dynasty, you had people like, and I'm going to butcher this, I apologize. His name was Mentuhotep. 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 Something like that. Again, butchering, that's okay. So he is credited with ending the first intermediate period. Basically, when he brought back together the central government of Egypt. Interesting enough, now this is really, to me, this is very interesting. Egypt went through the most transitions out of any other kingdom, and yet still stayed its same self. Now, it did have transitions and movement, but most of its landmass was basically the same. It increased, it decreased. It had all these different people taking it over, but it still stayed Egypt, which is quite fascinating because from 2000 BC until 2000 AD, 4,000 years, it's still Egypt. Nubia became Sudan, and other countries took over part of it. Let's see, Western Africa and let's say Mali Empire became many different nations. It actually became another empire after that, and so forth. There's the Ghana Empire. The Aztecs. Aztecs were a small group and expanded, taking over all these different civilizations, and then one day, mysteriously, when the Spanish showed up, hey, they were taken over. And it was never again Aztec. It was Mexico. That area became Mexico. So there's all these different places, but Egypt is one of those places that never changed. Mesopotamia became Iraq, Iran, and so forth. You had Persia, It's not no longer there. If you want to say Rome, Rome the city is actually there, but the countries became Italy instead of the Empire of Rome. So Egypt is like the only country that's actually gone through all these different transitions and stayed Egypt. Now here's the question. Did they actually call it Egypt back then? No, probably not. We have now called it Egypt because it's a region, it's an area, but it was also a people. So going back, the first intermediate period was ended by Mentuhotep. Mentuhotep. Mentuhotep, number 2. And so that was the 11th dynasty. And the 11th dynasty was where Thebes came in. Now, Thebes, if you have this picture, if you're watching our YouTube channel, if you're not, that's fine. You're going to actually see that Thebes is actually right smack dab in the middle of Egypt. A little bit lower than smack dab, but pretty darn close to to Middle Egypt, the middle of it. And this is one of the greatest cities that Egypt ever developed, with the grandest structures and such. Well, as you know, dynasties end because families die off and new dynasties come in. The 12th dynasty was marked by the height of the Middle Kingdom and its power. So this was founded by Eminem. Yes, Eminem. Amenemhat, this first, who moved the capital from Jatawi. Yeah. And so, this is, sorry, there are a lot of different names. I do like the Eminem hat. I will always remember Eminem hat, the first, who took over into the 12th dynasty, and his family started taking over. So his family were actually some of the most well known in the early parts of Egypt, including Senusret the first, Senusret the second, and Senusret the third. Wow, that just rolls off your tongue, right? And then there you have Amenemhat the third come in. I love it. I love how these names are very different, which, again, full respect to them. But interesting the fact that trying to say them, they're hard for us because we're not used to that kind of language. But it is very interesting to be able to understand. Theirs was they oversaw key construction projects, such as the irrigation system and several pyramids. This is the 12th dynasty. Now, there's one thing that you need to know, is that there's going to be a change in this kingdom. There's a change in the lower kingdom of Egypt. Now, around the 13th dynasty is when it started to fall apart. The 13th dynasty is around 1785 to 1650 BC. So, decline of the centralized government, which means that they all start breaking off into their own. One of the reasons for this is actually the most to me, the most interesting of this. Their name was, they were called the Hyksos. The Hyksos was a people. So this was a people that took over Lower Egypt. Now, they didn't take it by storm. They didn't take it by siege. They didn't take it by attacking and battling and so forth. They migrated. That's it. They migrated in. Now, they migrated in and took over. Well, interesting enough, this was actually possibly, very close possibility, that this was actually the Hebrews. And yeah, they say, oh, that's the Bible, not true, not real, it doesn't matter. Here's the thing that we're going to be talking about next month when we talk about the ancient Israel, is you have to be able to understand that this is actually a historical document. By any document that you use in Egypt, you have to be able to say that has the same credence as the Bible as a historical document. Now remember, things change. New rulers come in, they change the story, the history. Why? Because they want to have control over the people in Egypt. That's historically documented. Aztecs did the same thing. Now, interesting enough, in the Hebrews, the documents were not actually written at this point. It actually is a little bit different, a little bit afterwards, where all the documents are actually compiled. Then when the Hyksos move into Egypt. And so these documents are being compiled, but they're being basically put together in what would become the Torah for the Jews, and later on the first five books of Moses, which would be then put into the Christian Bible. So this is very interesting. If you give any credence to any document that's written in ancient times, or the paintings on stone carving, on the stones or rocks, you have to be able to give credence to the Bible as a document. Now, at this point, it's not put together as the Torah or the first five books of Moses. As it says, the first five books of Moses, who's the one that actually compiles it into a single document, the Torah. Now, everything else was either oral or written down, but interesting enough, so the Hyksos, the Egyptians, and every archaeologist and so forth all agree on one thing, that the Hyksos came from Canaan. Canaan is the place of Israel, Gaza, that area right below Syria. So that is all considered Canaan. Syria is just above Canaan. The people move from Canaan into Sinai and over into Egypt and settled in Lower Egypt, which this created a lot of stir within the dynasties. And so the 12th dynasty continued to function at a time when the 13th dynasty comes in, and that's actually when it starts falling apart. The 14th dynasty comes in, and it's completely like wiped out when it comes to the dynasties. They rule the upper kingdom. And so at this point, you have a dynasty that only runs the lower part of Egypt, because the upper part is taken over by people migrating into that area. So you have people that, if you believe in the Bible, it says that that Israel came in because Joseph came into Egypt and set up a relationship with the Pharaoh and was able to help them get past a famine that was put on. But a famine happened, which is why the Canaanites came down. The Hebrews came down. Now, it wasn't just Hebrews, it was others too. They all came down into this area during a time of famine. Well, the archaeologists, the historians, they all agree. It was the Canaanites came down during a time of famine and came into Egypt, which was still lush and green because the Nile and all the agriculture that they had. And according to the Bible, if you believe the Bible said that Joseph had actually helped them to put together about 7 years worth of storage, which helped them through that famine. The Nile dropped, its levels dropped. And historians and archaeologists agree on this. The Nile dropped. The fertile lands became less fertile. Things began to die, and yet the people still thrived during this time. Now, this is considered still the intermediate period because the dynasty is not in control. There's no dynasty in lower Egypt, which is in the northern spot. And so this created a stir within this time period. And so this is a decline of the Middle Ages. It's the 13th and 14th dynasty and the arrival of the Hyksos. Now, they started coming in around 2000 or so. Some say around 1800 to about 1650. No. So during this time, people are traveling from Canaan and coming into this area. Now, was it 7 years? Possibly. It possibly could have been 7 years. But this time period when the Hyksos were there expanded a lot longer than that. So at one point, as the Hyksos are thriving in this area, there's a group, the Hyksos are basically Canaanites and they're Semitic speaking. So that is actually a language that they're speaking. And they come down from Levant and the Canaan and create their established capital, which is Avaris. And so they have this location, which is great for them. Now, here's the thing. 15th, 16th dynasty, Theban resistance. The Thebans did not like the fact that their lower kingdom was taken over by a people who migrated in. And that Pharaoh did not know, if you believe in the Bible, the Pharaoh that was in power at that point did not know the Pharaoh that Joseph had made friends with. So, for this reason, the Egyptians begin to fight back, and the rise of the Thebes. So, gradually increasing their power down in the south, and start throwing a campaign together against the Hyksos and trying to push them out. Now, what's the interesting thing about this conversation is, okay, so now we understand and have a consensus among historians that the Hyksos came from Canaan and settled in Lower Egypt. And at one point, there's a possibility where they were kicked out. According to the Egyptians, the Hyksos were kicked out, were pushed out of this land. But the problem is that, the Egyptians, when they took over, what did they take from a land? They took their treasure, they became the power structure of that area, and they also took slaves. So what happens when Upper Egypt takes over Lower Egypt? They take slaves, most likely. Again, according to documents that we have in archaeology and history, they pushed them out. But again, with pushing them out, they would have also taken slaves, as it was their culture to do so. So there's actually a group of people that were credited with this. Sekenenre Tai and his sons Chamos, which, thank you, and Achmos the first. So here's an interesting thing. Remember the ending of that name. Now, where does the word mos come from? So you have Kamos and Amos. So where, I'm Googling this right now, where is the definition or translation of mos come from? Now, it wouldn't actually be a big transition, so origin. So let's see, transition or origin of the name Mos come from. Okay, let's see what it says. Okay, so we're going to be, whenever we don't know something, we're going to look it up right away. So the name Mos is often associated with the biblical figure Moses. Okay, we know that part. But here's the interesting thing. Okay, so in Egyptian origin, the most widely accepted theory is that the name Mos, as in Akmos and Kamos, it was an Egyptian origin. The Egyptian word MS or MOSE means born or son. So this term often appeared to be part of the names of Egyptian names. You have Tutmos, you have Ramses, which has the MS, which is like son god Ra. So born of Ra. Ram is born of Ra. Egyptian Tutmos means born of Thoth, which was, we talked about this last week, was the record keeper during the drawings that we had, the god that would keep records, Thoth. So Tutmos or Thothmos, born of Thoth. Ramses, born of Ramses, and Mos, as in Kamos, and Akmos, meaning born of something. I don't know what the Ka or the Ak means, but we can find that out as well. Interesting enough, it also has a Hebrew tradition that it means to draw out. So like when Moses was supposedly drawn out of the Nile, he was drawn out of the water, which is why his name was Moses, drawn out. So interesting. That's really cool. Okay, going back to what we were talking about before. So this is where the Thebes come in and start taking over the lower kingdom again, and start taking that back from the Hyksos, and start taking most likely slaves from that time. So they're completely established again, Egypt, in the new kingdom with Kamos beginning that aggressive campaign against the Hyksos and pushing them out and such. And then Ahmos, Kamos's son, continued the military campaign until he's actually taken over. And this was about 1550, 1549 BC. And the establishment of the new kingdom was 1549, with Ahmos as the reuniter of Egypt and the establishment of the 18th dynasty. And this is where the dynasty continues. So let's keep going here. So you have a lot of writing for the Egyptians in certain places, and some have been destroyed, some have been replaced. You have different things that were found in the Middle Kingdom. A lot of different things that were developed, including Thebes, the Valley of the Pharaohs and such was started in that area. You have a lot of different drawings and writings, different architecture for the Middle Ages, and different artwork that's done. So at this point, you have a group of people. This is a drawing of the Hyksos back a long time ago. This is most likely what it looked like. So, Egyptian, but also possibly with Canaanites, Hebrew as well. I mean, so it's really interesting the fact of these two civilizations merging together, and the struggle that there is, and I will actually say the struggle there is for archaeologists and historians to accept that most likely the Hebrew story was actually built off of the migration into Egypt, and the slavery and the Exodus was actually part of Egypt, was actually part of the Hyksos that were there. But when the new kingdom came in, what happened? They weren't pushed out. Egypt was flush with slaves. And because the new kingdom started to building a lot. There's a lot of places that are being built in this time period. So this is the start. This is the end of the second intermediate period and the start of the new kingdom. And we're not going to go any further from there because there's a lot to talk about when it comes to the new kingdom. But that's actually supposed to be the next episode. So why are people so fascinated with Egypt? It's like what I was saying. There's so many things that we just do not know, which is why finding out as much as possible, theorizing about the things that are going on. And like every civilization we talk about, you can't actually say that this is exactly how it happened, because it can't be that way. We were not there. The writings have been written, reestablished, or destroyed, and then brought back. So all these different things have happened in this time period. So you cannot actually say that this is exactly how things are going. And no archaeologist worth his weight will ever say that we know exactly what was happening in Egypt, because they're lying to themselves if they are. And it's not a consensus. They have the best that they know of, and they strive hard to be as accurate as possible. But again, you cannot, which is why sometimes they make it very broad. They might say the Hyksos, which could be made of the Canaanites and other places all coming in and migrating into this area and taking it over. But the thing that we do know is that we have a historical document being the Bible, and a historical document being anything that was written by the Egyptians, and there are similarities in them. So maybe it's the similarities that are the truth, and the things that are the most extreme are not. Or maybe I should say, not the basics to be able to place your belief on the civilization. Some things are religious, and some things are historical. Now, coming from a religious background, I have respect for the religious side of these things and the things that they're able to preserve in history, whether it be the Hebrews, the Jews to become the Jews, whether it be the Muslims, whether it become the Hindus, the Buddhists. All of these religions I have respect for, because they are people that are trying to live by their God or gods, Hindus and Buddhists. But interesting enough, when it comes to history, the histories actually do unite. They do come together. And so we're finding those common threads that happen between them. Now, when we get into not this next period on Thursday, but next Tuesday, we will be talking about Tuesday, maybe Thursday, the Exodus. Now, according to the Bible, there was an exodus from Egypt of the slaves that they were taken from the Canaanites or the Hebrews, and they left Egypt. So here's the question: how did that happen? What Pharaoh was in charge? When did this happen? So we're going to be talking about this because this brings Egypt together, and so this is a very important part to understand. So, but I won't keep going. I'll let you go. I know you have other things to do today, but I hope you appreciated this and be able to understand what we're saying. So this is most likely the time when the Canaanites, being the Hebrews, came into Egypt and established the Egyptian partnership at the time. Now, how the pharaohs that took over the lower kingdom from the Canaanites came in, or the Hyksos, we don't know. We don't know much about them in the sense of what they did with the people that were there. What happened to the people that were there? Did they change the history of the people that were there? Or maybe they didn't change the history at all. Maybe when the Exodus happened, the Pharaoh was so embarrassed by what happened that he changed the history. Because there is actually evidence of the Hebrews being in the area, but the information that was lost is quite dramatic, which is why when Moses leaves Egypt, according to the Bible, it's all written down. And then it's not changed at that point. So, but the Egyptians did definitely change their documents. Could the Hebrews? Possibly. One prophet comes in and the next one comes in, but less likely, because, and this is where the interesting part comes in, there's actually archaeological evidence that it did not happen, or sorry, that it did not get changed, because we have documents that were written around the same time that have come up. Not the Dead Sea Scrolls, but others, and even the Dead Sea Scrolls. So this is why it's fascinating. What actually happened? It's a mystery. It's a puzzle. And I don't know. I don't have all the answers. Neither do the archaeologists or historians. We just do the best that we can. And with that, we will catch you next time. Take care and have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.